Yo, what is good, guys? Today we'll have the first edition of my 2025 NFL mock draft. If you guys came over from TikTok, X, or Instagram, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. We'll start right here at number 1 overall with the Tennessee Titans. I feel like this is a pretty obvious selection for many of us. It's been the consensus quarterback one, and it's been Cam Ward for feels like some time now. The Titans have really focused in on Cam Ward, especially in the last couple months with the private workouts after his pro day. He canceled a bunch of private workouts with a bunch of other teams, so he's pretty much now the only real option for Tennessee. And Tennessee needs a quarterback. They've shown that. They've addressed the offensive line in free agency with guys like Dan Moore. Two's been an interesting development here for Cleveland. Everybody pretty much thought early in the draft process that this was going to be Shedeur Sanders at number 2. I remember early in the draft process specifically, Shedeur Sanders even had, at one point, was the favorite to go number 1 overall before Cam Ward had his ascension at Miami. But now Shedeur Sanders has kind of fallen off a little bit down the board. I don't know if it's necessarily due to people saying there's character concerns, even though many teams have not really been in the building with him and know how he really reacts around a team, and his athleticism as a whole, compared to guys like, obviously, Jalen Miller, who's super athletic. But there are questions around Shedeur Sanders, so I will not have the Browns going quarterback here at number 2. I will have them going with Travis Hunter, who is pretty much the favorite to go at number 2. Pretty chalk so far, nothing crazy. Travis Hunter plays both sides of the ball. I can imagine he could do that in Cleveland. He could thrive well as a wide receiver, as they really need wide receivers. And he wouldn't necessarily have to play that cornerback 1 role in Cleveland, as you have guys like Greg Newsome there who could help him on the perimeter. 3 here with New York. New York is an interesting trade down spot for me. Because obviously we know their needs at quarterback. They pretty much are running into the season with Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson, and I don't know how comfortable they are doing that walking into the season. So I'd imagine they go quarterback eventually. At number 3 is the real question. Do you go quarterback? Do you go a guy like Shedeur Sanders? Do you make a surprise pick with a guy like Jackson Dart? I'm not sure. That's up to them. But if I were the Giants, I go best player available, and if I'm not trading out the pick, I'm going with Abdul Carter, edge out of Penn State. He's somebody you could pair along with guys like Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns on the outside. We know the concern with Abdul Carter is that his frame is a little bit small. He's not the biggest and heaviest edge rusher out there. He won't be very powerful off the edge. But he does bring some speed, and his twitch is something that you rarely find in an edge rusher. So being able to pick him at number 3 would be great for New York. Entering that edge rotation would create a dominant defensive line. Number 4 with the Patriots is something where I believe you should go offensive line. That's just me. You could go a guy, if you really want to be bold, you could go with Ashton Genty. You could go with a guy like Ted McMillan or Luther Burden on the outside. But the main revolving goal around the Patriots at number 4, other than obviously trading back, would be to help Drake May out. You invested a lot in Drake May in these last couple of years, or last year obviously, with the number 3 overall pick. You didn't start him until about mid-season. But you saw the flashes from Drake May. He really showed out in his short time that he had in New England. But you have to do whatever you can to put protection around Drake May. You compare that to a situation that Caleb Williams, for example, walked into last year. We thought he had the weapons. He still has pretty good weapons, but you need to shore up that offensive line, and Chicago learned the hard way with that one. So I don't think New England wants to go through that whole trouble with not having an offensive line around them. They've addressed it in free agency somewhat, but you have to do it in the draft, and you have to do it here at number 4 with Will Campbell from LSU. 5 has been an interesting spot for me with Jacksonville. You could go a variety of different places. You could go for wide receiver. You could go with the best player in the draft in Mason Graham, which I mostly lean towards. You could make a surprise pick and go Ashton Genty and kind of boot Travis Etienne out of that situation. But in my opinion, I'd select Mason Graham out of Michigan. He is the best overall player on this board, in my opinion. You could make an argument for Ashton Genty, but Ashton Genty obviously is a running back, and he's more of that finishing touch you put on an offense, as the Jaguars' defense, which will be needing Mason Graham, needs a lot more than just an interior defensive lineman. He will help a lot. He will definitely bring that whole unit together on the defensive line, as he could really, really go after the passer, or the quarterback, and could stuff the run in the middle. 6 with the Raiders. We're going to be pretty much chalk here for the most part until we get up to 7, 8, 9, where it could get really interesting, and then obviously the draft board will fall out from there. But I have the Raiders going with Ashton Genty. Nothing too crazy so far. We have pretty much the consensus. Genty would be something that the Raiders obviously very, very much need as a running back. He is one of the best overall players in this draft, in my opinion. His contact balance is absolutely unbelievable. He bounces off tacklers. He could hide behind offensive linemen, standing at only 5'8". You ever watch him in college, especially against that game against Oregon early in the season? You really saw him hide behind those tackles and burst out of nowhere, and that's how he created so many 60, 70-yard touchdowns in college. Remember, every week you check, he'd be at 200, 300 yards and X amount of touchdowns. It was insane. But Vegas could really use him. Number 7, the Jets could go a variety of ways. You have tackles like Armand Membu still left on the board. You have a guy like Tyler Warren still on the board. Obviously, there's still a bunch of guys like Ted McMillan. Do you go Malachi Starks? I'm not sure. But in my opinion, you got a quarterback in Justin Fields. You saw what happened to him in Chicago and even in Pittsburgh a little bit. The protection, when it's not shored up for him, he really relies on his legs. And you don't want that. You want Justin Fields to take that next step as a passer. And whether that be being a pocket passer, whether that being a scrambler. But he used his legs, although being great at it, way too much in his times in Chicago and Pittsburgh. And you need to protect him on the outside. And that's what will do here with Armand Membu at number 7. Right here with Carolina is an interesting spot. This wide receiver class is super deep. I know people like going Ted McMillan here at number 8, or even a guy like Luther Burden, or a wide receiver, or Tyler Warren even, in general, here at number 8. But in my opinion, I think you go defense, and I think you go with somebody that is very versatile, rushing the passer and playing off-ball linebacker, and that will be Jalen Walker out of Georgia. Jalen Walker, to me, is a very interesting player. You don't get many guys like him in the NFL. He reminds me a lot of what they had in Frankie Louvu 2 years ago, if you guys remember him. Frankie Louvu was one of those hybrid linebackers that you could blitz off the edge and drop back in coverage. You don't really find those guys in the NFL that much, especially at linebacker. It's really difficult for a guy to be able to drop back into coverage and come in off the edge. And Jalen Walker does just that, and he played that at an elite level in Georgia. So the Panthers could really have that centerpiece of their defense here with Jalen Walker at number 8, and that's who I have him going with. At number 9 with the New Orleans Saints, the way that the board is kind of fallen here to the Saints isn't really in their favor, in my opinion. You still have guys like Shedeur Sanders. Do you go Shedeur Sanders here at number 9 for New Orleans? That's definitely a question you ask. Do you go with a guy like Jahad Campbell and shore up that defense? Maybe even edge with a guy like Mike Green. I am really tempted to lean Shedeur here at number 9. But do you really want to risk your future, especially at this point when you don't really know if Derek Carr is coming back? This draft, in my opinion, this quarterback class is very weak. I don't think it's worth, other than maybe Cam Ward, taking a quarterback inside the top 10. Even at number 3 to the Giants, I don't think it's worth it. So we're going to pass on Shedeur Sanders here, and there's still always a chance they could maybe trade back into the first round and maybe even falls to them, or a guy like Jackson Dart falls to in the second or third round. I'm having a tough time deciding what to go with here at number 9 with the Saints. But one guy I've always leaned on, on defense especially, has been Mykel Williams out of Georgia. Mykel Williams also, in my opinion, compares a lot to Cameron Jordan. He's that big, long, run-stuffing interior. He could play from the interior, or edge rusher that the Saints need. Cam Jordan is getting up there in ages. Mykel Williams, obviously playing at Georgia, has faced elite competition, has played great in his seasons at Georgia. So that's who I have the Saints going here with at number 10. Here at number 10, we have edge rusher Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. As a Bears fan personally, which now you guys know, I would be very interested in Shamar Stewart. We obviously saw everything he showed at the Combine. This dude tested as one of the most athletic defensive linemen of all time. Honestly, probably the most athletic defensive lineman of all time. He is crazy measurable, standing 6'4", 6'5", huge. Absolutely built. But the one question is his college production. He played at Texas A&M for 3 years and had 1.5 sacks every year. Now, that's pretty atypical for a guy going at number 10 overall, especially an edge rusher, averaging 1.5 sacks a year and not generating pressure. But what I could tell you is from my time watching Shamar Stewart and watching his film, this dude generates pressure. When he is focused in on getting to the quarterback, he will get to the quarterback by all means necessary. Now going to the Bears, he will have the ability to sit behind guys like Montez Sweat, who is also an athletic freak. I believe ran a 4.4 in the 40 for a defensive lineman, which is unheard of. So he had the opportunity to learn from guys like Montez Sweat off the edge and newly signed Dayo Odengbo. Stewart to the Bears is something I am definitely interested in as a Bears fan. One guy I really like to the 49ers is Will Johnson, cornerback out of Michigan. This guy in my opinion, has been one of the consensus best players in the draft for me. He was an absolute lockdown corner in the Big Ten for Michigan. The only question is he's had some injury issues, and his speed down the field raises a little bit of question. But the one thing is, he's really physical. He can press you at the line of scrimmage. He makes plays. You ever see his highlights and his film, he gets on the ball quick. So that is somebody I'm definitely looking forward to if I'm a 49ers fan at number 11. Jahad Campbell is an interesting fit. Obviously, he could slide in right next to Fred Warner, which I guess you really don't need necessarily, as you still have Fred Warner, and slide in to replace Dre Greenlaw, who made his way to Denver. So that's definitely an option. But if I had to pick, if I was a GM of the 49ers, if I was John Lynch, I would go with Will Johnson to shore up that secondary and make sure your secondary is intact, especially with losing Charvarius Ward in free agency. So if I was John Lynch, that is the pick I would make. If you guys have been following mock drafts, you guys pretty much know what this pick is going to be based just on how this board is going. It is going to be Ted McMillan to the Dallas Cowboys. One of my favorite fits for Ted McMillan in the draft, actually. You get a chance to be a wide receiver too. You don't necessarily have to step in automatically and be a wide receiver one and take on all that responsibility. You go to Dallas next to CeeDee Lamb, you have great mentors, and get to go to a pass-heavy offense that will get you the ball. Whether that you walk into Carolina where you're walking into a situation where you're not really necessarily sure if you're going to be getting your targets with Bryce Young. So you don't necessarily know if you're walking in to a great situation. But Ted McMillan gets to walk in as a wide receiver too, be the big body wide receiver on the opposite side of CeeDee Lamb. That would be huge for Dallas. Dallas has been lacking that wide receiver too for a while now. They finally get their guy in Ted McMillan, which I believe will be absolutely huge for his development and for the Dallas Cowboys as they hopefully get back into playoff contention now that Dak Prescott will be healthy. At number for Miami here, at number 13, I believe you kind of have to go offensive line. I know there's been a lot of talk about Malachi Starks going to Miami, specifically for the replacement of Javon Holland, as he left and to go to, I believe, the Carolina Panthers, if I remember correctly. There's going to be teams like Philly, teams like Kansas City, who end up with absolute studs at 31 and 32, even though they went to the Super Bowl last year. So at number 13, we are going to go with Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas. Teron Armstead was getting up there in age. You can't really rely on a tackle that late in his career to really stand up, play every single down, and really play at an elite level. So you're going to grab a guy in Kelvin Banks who is a traditional tackle, will stick at tackle. You don't have to worry about moving him to guard like people have been saying with Armand Membu and Will Campbell. But you'll get a guy, Kelvin Banks, that can slot right into that tackle spot and play from day one automatically. So that is a great pick, I believe, for Miami, and somebody who I definitely believe fits in really well for them at number 13. For the Colts at number 14, like I just mentioned, this is one of my favorite fits in this draft, and it's going to be Jahad Campbell, linebacker out of Alabama. One thing I've definitely noticed throughout the years, just watching the NFL, is that the Colts produce tackling machines. You guys have guys like Darius Leonard. You have guys like E.J. Speed, who actually just left them in free agency, where I believe Jahad Campbell could slide right into. They produce guys who fly around the field and are centerpieces of those Colts defenses. Jahad Campbell could be just that. He could be that Darius Leonard that they had a couple years ago, where you could have him playing in coverage and having him rush the passer, which Jahad Campbell is really, really strong at. That is something where I believe he could slide in at and be a stud. So him going to the Colts would be awesome for him and awesome for the Colts. It's tough for me because Atlanta, you always think they could possibly go defense, but then they come out of nowhere and select the receiver, select the running back like they did with Bijan or Kyle Pitts. Will this be the year that Atlanta goes defense? You have a guy like Walter Nolan, who's been flying up draft boards recently, who could kind of be your Grady Jarrett replacement on the inside. You also have guys like Donovan Ezraku and Mike Green, who I really like coming out of Marshall, being the most productive sack leader in all of college football. And I think this is finally the year that they go defense, and they're going to go with their new edge rusher, Mike Green. It seems like the Falcons almost kind of have it figured out on offense. The stats might not show, but they got absolute studs on the roster. You got Bijan and Drake London. Now you got Darnell Mooney. You have Michael Penix. I think it's finally the time where you go defense and strengthen up that defense for Atlanta. Mike Green, the most productive edge rusher in all of college football, like I mentioned. An absolute crazy frame, dominated at the Senior Bowl, really showed out. That really boosts up his draft stock as a whole. He was consistently a second or third rounder, and now is going pretty much a top 20 in every single mock draft. So that's why I have going to Atlanta here at number 15. 16 to Arizona. I believe this is traditionally offensive line for me as I've gone through my mock drafts, and I think that's where they end up here as well. But the question is, do you go with a guy who you know could play tackle or a guy that you know could play interior like Gray Zabel? One of the biggest what-ifs in this draft, and probably the biggest what-if in this draft, is Josh Simmons out of Ohio State. Josh Simmons would have been a top 10 pick if he were not to get injured this year, straight up. He was dominant at Ohio State, and that says a lot. Going up against your Michigan guys like Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, and your other guys that you have there in the Big Ten like Abdul Carter. Josh Simmons, if he was healthy this year, would have been a top 10 pick, and I think you pair him up with the other offensive tackle Ohio State, former Ohio State offensive tackle Paris Johnson. I think you pair those two up, and you go Josh Simmons here at 16. Protecting your quarterback is always key. Josh Simmons, I feel like the Cardinals are put in a solid position to take a risk on Josh Simmons here, and that's why I have him going with here at number 16 to Arizona. We have the Bengals here at number 17. The board has felt pretty bad for the Bengals because we all know what the Bengals need, and they need defense, and you need that defense to hit very quickly because you're paying guys like Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow upwards of $40x million. You're in a situation with, do you get rid of Trey Hendrickson? Do you make things work with him? You need defense all around the board. You need secondary help. You need linebackers. You now need defensive line. And a lot of those top guys like Mike Green and Shamar Stewart, Mykal Williams, Jalen Walker have fallen off the board for the Bengals. Where do you go here if you're Cincinnati? Do you go edge with a guy like Donovan Ezaraku or a guy like James Pierce, who've been a little bit, you know what you're getting with James Pierce, but there has been some character concerns we've heard lately from him. Do you go with a guy like even Nick Scorton, which was highly touted early in the draft process? Or you could go defense with a guy like Walter Nolan or Jahdae Barron, who was fallen a decent bit to 17 here with the Cincinnati Bengals. But I think if I'm the Bengals, you need defense everywhere. You go with the single best player on the board, and that would be Malachi Starks. This is somewhere I haven't had Starks going lately, and I think it could be a pretty good fit. We know how much Cincinnati needs defense, and if you find yourself in a position where you need defense all around the field, you might as well take the best player available. And in my opinion, that will be Malachi Starks here at number 17. Seattle here at number 18. I think this has fallen great for them. Now that Jahdae Barron has fallen to Seattle, he thrives in zone coverage. He's a great and willing tackler. But if you have a guy like him where you could send one of Devon Witherspoon or Jahdae Barron on the outside, who won the award for the best cornerback of college football, you could draft him here at number 18 and pretty much slide him in wherever. He is probably the best player on this board. We have the Buccaneers here at number 19. One guy that's fallen down the board crazily to me is Tyler Warren. None of these tight ends, other than Tyler Warren, really impressed me, in my opinion. I'm not a big Colson Loveland guy, but I think Tyler Warren is an absolute stud. The thing is, do the Buccaneers need a tight end here at number 19? It depends. I'm not sure. This is probably the farthest I've ever had Tyler Warren fall in a mock draft. So this is new to me, trying to mock him in these later picks to a guy or somewhere like the Steelers or even Minnesota or Houston. It's just something. That's why you do these mock drafts. You play around with scenarios that you never know could happen. But I'm not gonna have him go Tyler Warren here. I will have Tampa Bay going with Donovan Ezaraku out of Boston College. Donovan Ezaraku is a pure pass rusher, super rangy. They signed Hassan Reddick in free agency to a one-year prove-it deal. And I think Ezaraku could step on the other side of him and form a solid edge rusher duo pretty much right away. I feel like Tampa Bay's gone edge a lot in these recent drafts, and I'm not sure if they really shy away from that as they continue to evaluate this draft class. And I think they're pretty much dead set on going edge here at number. We do have our pick here at number 20 for Denver, and it will be the guy who's fallen this far to at this point to number 20 overall, which is somewhere I've never seen him really mocked. Tyler Warren to Denver. Tyler Warren to Denver would be amazing for Bo Nix. It would be amazing for Sean Payton, who I think would have a ball with Tyler Warren at tight end. This dude lines up everywhere. If you watch him in film, he's lined up. He's thrown passes. He's lined up in the backfield. He's lined up out wide. He's lined up in the slot and at tight end. Sean Payton is somebody who could get really creative with guys like formerly, or still is a New Orleans Saint, like Taysom Hill. And I think Tyler Warren could not necessarily transition into that role that Taysom Hill was. Taysom Hill was kind of pretty much just a do-it-all gadget guy. Tyler Warren is a strictly tight end. But he has the versatility to move around in a bunch of positions at the NFL level. And he's somebody where I think it could be an absolute dream for Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos. And there would be so much fun to be had in Denver if Tyler Warren ends up a Denver Bronco. At 21 with the Pittsburgh Steelers, they do get their quarterback, and it will be Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado. Pittsburgh, it kind of sucks for them because they've pigeonholed themselves to this point where they need a quarterback. You cannot go into the season with Mason Rudolph as your starting quarterback, especially with the defense that you had, and after making the trade for DK Metcalf. You have everything set up around you for a quarterback to walk in and play good football right away. Now, if it's not quarterback in the draft, it's Aaron Rodgers or bust. So you kind of pigeonholed yourself to take a quarterback in this draft, and luckily for them, it is Shedeur Sanders here at number 21, which is an interesting fit. We'll see how he does in Pittsburgh if he were to go there. I think he's very NFL ready, and could definitely slide in pretty seamlessly, especially with the acquisition of DK Metcalf. And we do have our pick here for the Los Angeles Chargers at number 22. And Harbaugh would get his Michigan guy here with Colson Loveland going to the Chargers at 22. Colson Loveland, I'm going to be completely honest, I'm not the biggest fan of. I really liked him coming into this season. This season he struggled with a lot of injury issues and necessarily wasn't on the field as much. But Colson Loveland is a very solid tight end. Don't get me wrong. He will line up. He could line up on the outside. He's very tall. He has very strong hands. And even though I don't think he has necessarily the traits to be a complete star, he does have the makings of a very solid tight end, and kind of reminds me of just a little bit of Trey McBride out of Arizona. That would be my NFL comp for Colson Loveland, where I'm sure Harbaugh would be very thrilled to get his Michigan guy, whom he coached at Michigan, on his team. All right, we have our pick with Green Bay here at number 23, and it will be Matthew Golden out of Texas. I am a huge Matthew Golden fan. This dude simply does not drop the football and runs great route. It pretty much does everything you want out of a wide receiver. His ascension this year on Texas has been something to see. Every single game, it seems like he gotten better all the way up until the college football playoff. If you guys remember the one game versus Arizona State where he caught the game-winning touchdown. Didn't really necessarily play a huge factor in that game, but as the game wound down, he made big plays, and that is one thing he's done all season for Texas. I think his best football is ahead of him. Coming from Houston to Texas, he has been an absolute monster. And something that was really surprising at the NFL Combine was Matthew Golden ran a 4.2940, which pretty much nobody expected. Everybody was thinking his Texas teammate Isaiah Bond was going to tear up the 40-yard dash. He even claimed he was going to break the 40-yard dash record. Little do you know, it was Matthew Golden who held the 40-yard dash record this combine for the Texas Longhorns and the whole combine, which is pretty cool to see. And he doesn't really have many weaknesses. He can play on the outside, play in the slot. Strong hands, obviously, is what you want out of a wide receiver. So the Packers getting Matthew Golden would be absolutely awesome for them, as they have a lot of solid wide receivers, but not necessarily that star. And Matthew Golden, in my opinion, could be that star receiver. So the Vikings here at number 24. One place I've definitely gone in mock drafts with Minnesota has been the secondary. If Malachi Starks falls to Minnesota somehow, I pretty much have him as an auto selection to Minnesota. A lot of the cornerbacks, at least top name quarterbacks, have fallen off the board as well for Minnesota. So it depends. But there's one guy who's sticking out among the rest, in my opinion, and that is Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss. Walter Nolan profiles similar, or what I think in general, to Jonathan Allen, who the Vikings just acquired in free agency. Jonathan Allen would be pretty much the perfect mentor for a guy like Walter Nolan. Walter Nolan is exceptional at rushing the passer, which you don't really see a lot in defensive linemen, especially interior defensive linemen. You don't really see that ability to rush the passer. For example, a guy like Kenneth Grant, who's obviously an amazing player at stuffing the run, but having that extra pass rush ability as an interior defensive lineman definitely puts you up a notch and definitely takes your upside up to a whole nother level. And that's pretty much the reason why I would have the Vikings selecting Walter Nolan here at number 24. Is the upside is crazy with him. He could be an absolute game wrecker on the interior. I don't think many people. I think people are starting to eventually realize that right now, and I believe they have him going with Walter Nolan and the Ole Miss product here at number 24. So for the Texans here at number 25, I think your guy, or CJ Stroud's guy in general, has fallen perfectly to Houston, and that would be Emeka Egbuka going to Houston. We don't know what the situation with Tank Dell as of right now. He obviously had that tragic injury last year versus Kansas City. We don't know his status. You obviously have Nico Collins, but he's had injury issues the past 2 seasons. And you obviously lost Stephon Diggs in free agency. And that third wide receiver, you kind of been trying to find out in the last couple of years. You tried it with John Mechie, who's been all right. You've tried it with Xavier Hutchinson, who hasn't really shown many flashes. So Emeka Egbuka right now would be your wide receiver 2, and worst comes to worst, he would be your wide receiver 3, where you could when you have Tank Dell return. So Egbuka here reuniting with C.J. Stroud is something I would definitely love, and would be a really cool story. Him and C.J. Stroud would create so many highlights in Ohio State, and I'm sure they would do the same in the NFL. And that's why I have him going with here at number 25. 26 to Los Angeles. We have him going with Kentucky cornerback Maxwell Hairston. I actually saw this guy in person run the 40 at the NFL Combine. This dude is blazing fast. 4.29 speed. In corners, you don't really see that as much as you probably should, especially with the way the receivers are running nowadays. Played in the SEC, went up against good competition, super long and rangy. Kind of reminds me a little bit, if you guys know Dante Jackson, who played for Carolina. I believe still plays for Carolina. Reminds me a lot of him. Crazy fast athlete, super good on the outside, has great ball instincts. Something where obviously the Rams really need cornerback depth. One guy I've had personally go to the Rams a lot is Trey Amos from Ole Miss. I feel like the big thing around Trey Amos is he transferred up from Louisiana Lafayette to Ole Miss, which they say that the GM of the Rams, Les Snead, really likes guys who like to transfer up colleges. But in my opinion, I think Maxwell Harrison is the best player on this board. You don't find that athleticism at the cornerback position often. So when you do, you have to definitely take it into account in your selection in terms of the draft. So for the Ravens at number 27, as we wind down at the end of this draft, still have a lot of good guys left on the board for the Ravens. And there's one guy that sticks out to me who I've had go to the Ravens a lot in mock drafts is James Pierce Jr. James Pierce Jr., I remember one point early in the draft process, was actually was pretty much the consensus number 1 overall pick, and was a pretty heavy favorite to go number 1 overall in this draft. But the question or he has a couple questions, a matter of fact. His size, he's a little bit undersized for an edge rusher. He needs to get up, add a little bit more weight. I believe he sits at around 215, 220, which is a little bit thinner for an edge rusher, but he wins with his speed, so you really don't necessarily have to bulk up like too much in order to try to generate pressure off the edge. That's his main thing. He wins with speed. And apparently, from what I've read, there's been character concerns. I don't know how true they are. So with interviews in general, I'm sure teams are beginning to really know the true James Pierce Jr. I'm sure making those evaluations accordingly. But James Pierce would benefit a lot in the Ravens system. He would be a designated pass rusher. You could send him off the edge and pretty much give him a chance to win on the edge and generate sacks. Kind of similar to what Odafe Oweh did in his rookie season, where I believe he had close to 10 sacks in his rookie season, dominated as a second, third, or fourth round pick. 28 for the Lions, which is awesome. And we have our pick here with Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State. It says tackle, but a lot of people are projecting Gray Zabel to be honestly either a guard or a center in the NFL, and that's what Detroit does. They produce offensive linemen. The question is, how much of a role did Ben Johnson play into the development of these offensive linemen? If you guys don't really remember, Frank Ragnow and guys like that, Jonah Jackson, when he was there, when they walked into Detroit, they weren't necessarily the best offensive linemen in the world. They had a lot of development. They had years and years of development going into where they are today, being pretty much the consensus best line or a lineman group in football. So if you got a guy like Ray Zabel in there and develop him, obviously going to North Dakota State might hinder him just a little bit in terms of the competition that he faced. Obviously, they had a home run pick with Penei Sewell a couple years ago. Let's see if they go with Ray Zabel here and make a great selection. At number 29 for the Commanders, and our pick is in, which is awesome. We have a really interesting one, really fun one, the more I think about it, would be pairing up Omarion Hampton in Washington with Jaden Daniels and company. Omarion Hampton is a true workhorse running back in the NFL. There's not many guys left like that, but he could walk in and immediately become your running back one no matter where he goes. I really like this pick just in general from a Commander's perspective. I'm not the biggest fan of Brian Robinson Jr. He's an all right running back, but you got guys like Austin Eckler who's getting up there in age, Jeremy McNichols who's I guess shown a little bit of flashes lately, but having Omarion Hampton, setting him in there where he could be that true workhorse back, pairing up alongside Jane Daniels, where Jane Daniels and him would create a lethal read option duo. This guy hits home runs, barrels off of guys, breaks tackles like crazy. Buffalo here at number 30, we have our next pick, and that will be Kenneth Grant. Buffalo has really lucked out in this situation with Kenneth Grant falling this far. I think he could go anywhere from as high as even inside the top 10, going to maybe Chicago or even Dallas or Miami. And he falls all the way to number 30 to the Buffalo Bills. It is a need for Buffalo. You pretty much have to. They've been drafting defense, it seems, lately a lot in the draft. And Kenneth Grant would fit nicely inside the middle of that defensive line. He's a big, burly run stuffer. He congests the inside of that offensive line and will generate a lot of pressure through the middle. Him and Mason Graham absolutely dominated the interior of offensive lines in college. And Kenneth Grant was solely helped a lot with Mason Graham's development, as Mason Graham was more of the, I guess, interior defensive lineman, pass rusher, which some teams kind of run. But Kenneth Grant being pretty much strictly a nose tackle, not really nose tackle, but an interior defensive lineman whose main goal is to stop the run. I've traditionally mocked offensive linemen to Kansas City at number 31. Like I said, this wide receiver class is very, very deep. Do you risk going with a guy like Luther Burden when you can end up with a guy like Jalen Knoll or Jalen Higgins in the second or third round when you just necessarily don't need receiver? Princely Umanlian. But I'm going to go offensive line with Kansas City after what we saw in the Super Bowl. You do not want that happening again. Yeah, in my opinion, the best offensive lineman available is Josh Connerly out of Oregon, and that's what I end up going with. Josh Connerly got a little bit of a bad rep just due to that video of Mike Green running him over in the Senior Bowl. If you guys haven't seen that video, his stock fell a little bit after that, but he played a very important role in Oregon's, obviously being the number one overall seed in the college football playoff. He played a very important role in that, in protecting Dylan Gabriel and that offense. And I think he could do the same for Kansas City. He won't necessarily have to start right away, which it seems like Kansas City is definitely valuing in their picks lately. I remember a guy like Kingsley Suamataia getting drafted last year. Didn't have to start right away, and now will most likely be the starting guard for Kansas City this year. So you give him time to develop, and it's definitely worked. You've seen for guys like Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey. Kansas City, frankly, produces offensive linemen, and if they could get Josh Connerly in there and develop him the right way, he could definitely be a very good NFL starter. Thoroughly appreciate it. Our last pick will be Josh Connerly's Oregon teammate, defensive lineman Derek Harmon out of Oregon. Derek Harmon would play a huge role for the interior of that Philly offensive line. This guy generates pressure, frankly. He stuffs up that interior. He will have no issue trying to adapt to the NFL level, especially with you have guys like Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis in place already who could definitely mentor him and turn him into a great NFL starter, and he necessarily won't have too much on his plate the moment he enters in Philadelphia, which anybody pretty much entering Philadelphia wouldn't necessarily have to have, because their team just in general is so strong in all areas of the field. If you guys haven't seen it already, there you go. I really like the way this board fell. One guy I really think fell way too far, who I almost didn't even realize at one point, was Tyler Warren going to Denver, which would be a great fit here for Sean Payton and company. I really appreciate all you guys. If you guys haven't, hit that subscribe button if you're on YouTube. If you guys want to check out our other socials, we got TikTok, we have Instagram. You can check out our website to read some of our articles. I've been publishing articles on there lately about the NFL draft. If you guys are interested, make sure you guys go to those links in our description. Like I said, I really appreciate you guys sticking in here.